Hey everybody, it's Joy Brooks today with email and coffee and a high school friend, Janice Ferebee. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Janice so she could tell us a little bit about herself.
Well, thanks, Joy. It's so good to see you and know that we're working on our 50th reunion. So I'm excited about that. But I'm Janice Ferebee. I'm a native New Yorker, grew up in Westbury, Long Island with Joy. And I am now an author, speaker, elected official. I'm the host of a podcast, Sankofa Conversations. And I'm getting ready to put out the revised edition of Got It Going On Too, Power Tools for Girls, a social emotional personal development handbook for girls that I also started a program by the same name back in about 2000, was featured on Oprah, the Oprah Winfrey Show, and won a 2003 Essence Award. I'm a retired social worker and nonprofit professional, and we'll talk about that in a little while. I am a two-time cancer survivor, fallopian tube cancer,
baby.
blessed with over 30 years in long-term recovery. So I consider myself a miracle, and part of the work that I do to empower women and girls, Black, white, red, yellow, or brown around the world, is to help them to grow up great, the girls, and to help women to continue living their best life. So that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
So we went to high school and we did all those high school things. Which we don't necessarily need to talk about because my high school years are very interesting. But then we went to college, right? And we studied and things change, So what happened to you after college or during college? What sort of put you on the road to where you are now?
Well, I will go back to high school. I was in the band, orchestra, chorus. I was a cheerleader, honor society, the pre-med club. And I initially went to Johns Hopkins. I wanted to be a heart surgeon. So I was a pre-med major. Life happened. I ended up transferring to Michigan State University and changed my major. Two of my areas of interest were fashion. I was on the fashion board at Abraham and Strauss, if people remember that, in Brooklyn, and I was on the pre-med club. But I changed my major when I moved to Michigan State to retailing of clothing and textiles. So I became a fashion and retailing major. And after I left there, I became an assistant buyer at Abraham and Strauss in Brooklyn. And it's so funny because I can't remember, Carl Asiatola from Westbury High talked recently on Facebook about standing at the same spot in Westbury at the Long Island Railroad. And I remember standing in the same spot, going to work, going to Penn Station, and then taking the subway to Brooklyn. But I remember getting to know the people at the stop, and we knew where the doors were going to open. We'd all stand there. When it rained, you put your umbrella up you shared it with people. But just a wonderful memory, and I had a great experience growing up. After college again, Abraham and Strauss, and then I went to 17 Magazine in 1979. I was their first African-American models editor in New York City, and that was interesting and a little frustrating, but I was able to utilize.
What year was that?
What year?
Yeah, about what year?
1979.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
A few years after graduating from 2 years, because I graduated from Michigan State in 1977, but had a wonderful but frustrating time, not all frustrating, but worked with, I was the models editor, and then I was also a fashion editor or assistant fashion editor. And a couple of the models that we worked with that people may know, Christian Alfonso, if you watch Days of Our Lives, that is Hope, and Phoebe Cates, who I believe is married to Kevin, I forgot his last name. But people may know her as well. But those were two of the models that I work with, and it's just so exciting to see where their lives have gone, But that is exactly where I began my interest in working with girls. Every Friday, we used to have what were called go-sees, where individuals would come in to be interviewed, we would determine whether or not they would be in the magazine or not. So I would take Polaroids, I would talk to them. I also did presentations to audiences, that would come to New York, come to visit the magazine. And most of the girls, I don't think any of the girls that came through at the point in time that I was there were chosen for either in magazine stories or covers. But what I was starting to see is that these girls and their stage mothers or these creepy guys that would bring them in would do almost anything to get into the magazine. Very much like what's going on today, but I think it's even more detrimental today because of social media. But that is where I decided that I wanted to do something to improve the quality of the lives of these girls, but also, or more importantly, to improve their confidence, cultural pride, and their self-esteem.
Yeah.
So I ended up moving to DC and started working in real estate. But I also started, I wrote a book. That's where my first book, Got It Going On, an image awareness guide for young ladies. 1995 is when I first wrote it. And then when I went to University of Pennsylvania for my master of social work, because I decided I wanted to do more with my background and experience, but I also wanted to be legitimate and I wanted to have some credentials behind it. So went to University of Pennsylvania. First book, I was featured on BET's Teen Summit with my first book. And I was so excited because I had always wanted to be known as a self-esteem expert. And when I was in my first semester in the graduate school, I got a call from BET's Teen Summit saying, we want you to come on as a self-esteem expert. So I was so excited. So that was a great opportunity. And then in 2005, I wrote the second book, Got It Going On, 2 Power Tools for Girls, which is, I started a program, got on Oprah, Essence, and now in November, the revised edition is coming out. It's, again, a modernized version, and it's really a must-have. So I have 3 books.
3 books.
3 books, but the first one is for girls 8 to 11. I haven't done any updating of that.
Okay.
The second book for girls 12 to 17.
Right.
That first came out in 2000. 2022 is the modernized version. So I've added a whole bunch of stuff, but thanks for asking, because social media wasn't around 22 years ago. So I had to add that. Culture, race, identity.
So much has changed.
Social media, gambling for teens, and alternative lifestyles and all those kinds of things were not around, or were not very well publicized or talked about. So that's been interesting. So again, I talk about it being a must-have for every girl's personal library.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's where I am today.
I like the books because I think that as girls growing up, our mothers do the best they can, but mothers don't come with instructions.
Right.
Sometimes they make mistakes. They do what their mothers did, or they do what their mothers didn't do.
Right.
So that's as far as they get with instruction. So books that act as an instruction book, or something that helps girls, mothers, both, is today, in today's world where it's so crazy and everybody's listening to everybody else,
right,
and they're just all over the place and change dramatically from Monday to Friday.
Right, from Monday to Tuesday.
Yeah, sometimes it's important to have, you need to be grounded. So you need to be able to say, things are changing around me, but I know who I am. And here's how here's a way to learn. And you could share it with friends, and women can share it with women. And as you said, it's cross ethnics, cross culture. This is basically for women growing up in a world that's changing.
Right.
Exactly. And today, today, even just saying the word woman it becomes politically,
female. Yep. But you hit it right on the head. This is a navigational tool for educators, parents, juvenile justice professionals, faith-based professionals, organizations to use with, even though I talk about, focusing on Black and brown girls, but I have guardian angels. I introduce the Got It Going On guardian angels, and they're different ethnicities, different ages. They each have a story. Like Love, who kind of represents me, is 17 years old, and she had childhood leukemia, so cancer. And since I'm a cancer survivor, and she talks about that in the bubbles. There are speech bubbles throughout the book. Charity is European, so she's Caucasian, and she is very aware of race and power and is interested in learning about all, cultures. So that is what's interesting about this book. But also the other thing you said, a lot of times our parents, educators, whoever our caregivers are, do the best they can. And they don't have all the tools, or they might, they just need assistance and supplemental help. And that's what Got It Going On too is about. Also, because even if you have sheltered or thought you did a whole lot of work on building your child's, especially your girl's self-esteem and, being proud of who they are, where they come from, once they go out the door, social media, and I talk about counteracting negative images, influences, and messages that our girls are bombarded with every day, and the mental and emotional destruction of COVID-19. So those girls have the opportunity to get a copy of Got It Going On, and I'm going to be creating an interactive copy as well, because it is a workbook, so they can get it an ebook, and they can, or a PDF. But it's a way for them to do exactly what you said, to learn about who they are, to be proud of who they are, and to have a bottom line, even when they're not with their parents, even when they're being bullied because they're not doing certain things that other girls are doing, So it is a tool that they can use to increase their self-esteem and have tools for them to combat, all the insanity out there.
Yeah, it's difficult. I'd say that when girls are introduced to sports, like men are introduced to sports, there is a discipline.
Mm-hmm.
They learn that if you're not involved in sports, you never learn. Right. If you're going to school and you're in a glee club or, things of that nature, you don't necessarily learn a discipline. You also don't learn a team spirit.
Mm-hmm.
That's something very specific to sports. Now, whether or not that's healthy or not, because I can also say how unhealthy that is, because it begins a competition that may not necessarily be healthy, but it introduces a discipline into your mind where you could say, I need to put aside this, that, or the other thing because the goal is this, right? And that's transferable, right?
Yeah.
And there are many skills that are transferable that we need not only to teach children, girls and boys, teach them how to transfer them. So that, in sports, this is how we're going to be in sports, but, explain to them, this is also how the real world works.
Exactly. And research studies show that girls who are involved in sports have higher confidence, have increased confidence. But you're absolutely right, learning team playing, but also learning how to win and lose if they are on a team that has a compassionate coach, because you're absolutely right. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that can go, haywire. But if you have a really compassionate, healthy, personal development coach, someone who knows about the developmental stages of adolescence, teaching how to win and lose, that you don't always have to be the first, all that kind of stuff, and just doing your best. Is really important, and especially for girls, because one of the things that I've been doing is working with some all-girls schools, and a lot of them say that the girls flourish more in all-girls schools because, now, of course, there's the downside because of gossip and all that kind of crap, but the girls are more willing to raise their hand because they're not being intimidated by the boys, and they're more willing to speak out. So those are some of the things that I've learned about working in the girl serving organization field and working with adolescent girls, especially.
There's a plus and negative, and I'm going to use the term when you segregate, when it's tribal.
Absolutely.
There's a plus and negative because the group has camaraderie. There's a commonality. There's a common denominator. We're all girls here. There's safety in that. Obviously, that doesn't teach them how to deal with men.
Right.
So outside, they're like, what do I do? But I agree with you, for education's sake.
And that's not for everyone. It depends on what you're looking for your child. And like you said, many of the girls' schools that I've worked with have a brother boys' school,
Right.
So that they do get that interaction,
Right.
learn the social skills of how to deal with young men and all that kind of stuff. But you're absolutely right. And the converse can be said for boys and girls, all that kind of stuff. It just means that wherever you are, you need to feel good about yourself. You need to find tools that will help increase your I call it emotional quotient, your social emotional well-being as you grow up. Got It Going On is one of those tools. And there's also a curriculum that I created for the program that I ran, which was what got me featured on the Oprah Winfrey Show and the Essence Award. That is being updated as well. And I already have school district in Roosevelt, New York, that is interested. I've been working with a woman, Rose Gashir, who was at the time in 2005 a PTA president. She is now the president of the Roosevelt Union Free Public School District. And but she got trained and Got It Going On. She was trained and licensed and ran a program for about 5 years, 650 girls, and she's interested in bringing it back, to the entire district. So, and then there are other organizations and programs, that I'm going to be working with the Girl Scouts of the nation's capital. This year is the 110th anniversary, and I've been asked to be a panelist for their advocacy festival because of my relationship. I'm the descendant of Dr. Dorothy Bolding Ferebee, who was the 4th national vice president of the Girl Scouts of the USA, and she was the first African American to hold that position. She has a whole lot of other accolades, after her name and her accomplishments. But also, I'm an elected official, the Ward 2 committee woman for the the DC Democratic State Committee. So I'm going to be a panel member, and they've asked for 300 books to be donated, and then just other programs, and so I'm excited. Because there was a time when I, was going through, especially my first bout with cancer, coming back and starting to write again and not knowing whether I was, or Got It Going On was still relevant. Well, I talked to a couple of folks and said, unfortunately, it's more needed than ever.
More needed than ever.
So I'm glad that I am able to be one of the solutions instead of part of the problem.
And that's important. A lot of people like to complain about stuff, or they like to tell everybody here the problems, but it's really very important to, at some point in time, train yourself to become a problem solver. You can see the problems, you can see the negatives, but you immediately begin to assemble the positives as opposed to, harping on the negatives, because there are plenty of negatives. Needless to say, that's the way life is. Again, there's no instruction book for life.
Mm-hmm.
It is all about challenge. Every day is a challenge. Waking up is a challenge, but you don't say, honestly, I wake up, I jump out of bed because I love coffee, and that's how I wake up. I'm like, I can't have coffee. I'm addicted. I don't know. I think I like the taste.
Well, is that where the title comes from?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Email and Coffee was initially about, obviously I'm email, and coffee was that warm and fuzzy feeling that it gives me, and how I wanted to pay it back by being who I am, email and coffee. So it's the brand itself is growing, and that's my little so when somebody interviews me, that'll be my story. But what is interesting to me is that your ancestry in America goes back farther than mine when I think about it, because you mentioned how your was it your
great aunt, not sure exactly what the title, but a descendant of Dorothy Boulding Ferebee. She was born in 1898.
right?
And then I've been able to trace the Ferebee, because she married a Ferebee. So I've been able to trace the Ferebee family to 1700s. Yeah. So.
And 1700s, is that back overseas in Africa, or is that?
I have not gotten to Africa yet.
So 1700s in the US.
In the US. So that's the beginning of slavery.
You've been here far longer. You're an American.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, when I say I am a second generation American. My mom and dad were born in America, but both my grandparents were not.
Where are they from?
My father's side, Austria.
Oh, wow.
And my mother's side, Russia. It's not Russia now, it's Odessa now, but
right.
When they left, it was Russia. So they came in the late 1890s.
Okay.
They came to America. And
yep. So
actually, my grandmother, my father's side might have come later than that. I know my grandfather around.
Yeah. So we both have roots, in this country, and that's part of what I do talk about. You talk about your podcast. I asked you about your podcast. I also have one, Sankofa Conversations, Empowering the Next Generation of Black Women Warriors. And this symbol that I have on my top is a Sankofa bird. And the Sankofa bird is one of the Adinkra symbols that were created by the Akan tribe in Ghana. And they're symbols that represent someone's life. And they are generally painted on burial cloth. So they represent who the person was in life. Okay. So my podcast focuses on women and girls and what they're doing, how they're doing it, and the needs of Black and brown girls, and how adults can support them. So I've had some wonderful guests on my show, and looking forward to starting season number 2 at the end of this month. So
sometimes the most everyday conversations are the more fascinating, because first of all, we are all connected, and we all have stories that not only we could tell somebody else, and they're obviously fascinating stories, even though they may be commonplace, but everybody will, at some point, everybody can connect to that story, because again, we're all connected. So, somebody will tell a story, and it could be the most far out story, things I've never done, never even dreamt of doing, can't even imagine being there. But then something will be said, and I'm like, yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
That's really how we grow as individuals, because when we get that connection, when that little warm and fuzzy thing happens between people, that's when we realize life is short. Everything's meaningful in life, everything. Yep. And miracles happen in a second, in a half a second. And if you don't slow down, listen, taste, hear, whatever it is, you miss it all. You really do miss it all. And those little things are the things that make you happy.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. Hearing someone else's story, learning about their lives, it can be magical, especially if you relate to it. I am so blessed. We talk about this. I feel so blessed to have grown up in Westbury when we did. Just knowing that we had a multicultural experience. That's how and where I learned about other cultures, how to get along with other cultures. And I also, through my parents and some school, learned about my heritage, being African American, and being proud of that, but also wanting to know about my Filipino friends, my Jewish friends, my Jamaican friends. So I feel very, very lucky for that. And that's part of the reason that I introduced the Goin on Guardian Angels, because we don't live in an all Black, all red, all white, all, world. And it's important, especially because our children are the next generation. They're going to be leading the world. They're going to be the ones taking care of us. But this place is being left to them, and it's really important for them to not hate, because hate is taught, to learn to embrace their own culture, but also be respectful and exploratory about other cultures.
Yes.
And that's, for me, what has really driven my life and made my life so rich and full. And it's also the reason why I was so excited to see friends at our 40th reunion, and I'm excited to see some of them also at our 50th. Because those were some special times. But those are some of the gifts that I feel that I'm giving back to the world, to the girls, especially in my retirement years, getting older. I'm not going to be around forever, but this is my gift to girls and to the world. So I think it is important, like you said, making those connections and relationships, hearing about somebody, relating to them, or learning something new is so important.
When you meet somebody new, or you're in a situation that perhaps maybe you're shy, I'll use the word fearful, leaning into that fear and learning how to understand that fear is normal. I mean, you meet somebody new, doesn't matter who the person is. Your boss for the first time, you're a friend, right? Right? You go to a foreign country, you're a friend. But it's an exciting afraid. And if people were not so, if they took fear and instead of making it a negative thing, made it a positive thing, and turned that process into, okay, when I feel those butterflies, instead of flight or fight, lean into it and learn.
Engage, yeah. And
find out, ask the questions, don't be afraid.
Especially with people who do not look like us, and that's again where hate is learned, because if you take a look at little babies, Black, white, whatever, they will play and they will be upset with you if you take them apart from each other. They don't care, yeah, you look different, your hair is a different texture, but I want to play and I like you. And, so it's not until they get older that they learn all this negative stuff. And if you don't know about someone, and I talked about this, I'm a former docent at the Museum of African American History and Culture. I used to talk about when you don't know about someone, you fear them and you make fun of them.
Right.
When you do learn about them, you may never talk to anyone of that race or, culture, but you learn to respect them.
Right.
You don't have to like me, but to respect a culture helps us get along with each other. It really does. And I pray for the future of this world of I really do. I really do.
I've always done it through food. Food, right? So I'll meet somebody who's different. And I'll be like, so, like, what do you eat? Or maybe I'll know, oh, do you eat this type of stuff? Like, how do you cook it? What does it taste like? Where do I find it? And I've always done it that way. And the thing is, because I like food, I'll cook it at home. And
that's
so
a great way. That is a great way.
And there's a lot of culture, for example, and I'm not getting it completely right. Forgive me, because I remember having the conversation. I remember looking it up, and now I remember forgetting. But there is coffee again. There is a tradition, and I'd like to say it's somewhere in Africa. I'm not sure. Something in my head makes me say Ethiopia, but I'm not sure. The culture is that you come to somebody's house, the woman in the house grinds the coffee, makes the coffee, and it's a little bit of a ceremony. You got to drink the coffee. And you drink the coffee. And that's I'm pretty sure it is Ethiopia, because Ethiopian coffee is the best, the best. So and the thing is, you'd think, what kind of story is that? The point is, it's a tradition, but it's one of those welcoming traditions that lots of cultures have, whereby you're a stranger, you're walking down the street, you're welcome in for refreshment. We have a conversation. My wife provides you with the niceties of the home. Okay, we could talk about that. Women just don't do that, but okay, let's not talk about that. But that's part of the tradition, you know. The woman is the woman's a housemaker, not just a homemaker. She's in charge of the house. Yeah. So in any case, and I always think about that. I almost always think about that whenever I have coffee.
Yeah, that's part of it.
There's a tradition there, and there's a lot of tradition in a lot of food.
Yep. And that's a great way to get to know somebody's culture.
Exactly.
It is. It's a wonderful way to get to know somebody's culture.
The other day, I'm behind a guy at the market, and if I tell you that he was buying the store out of green bananas, I'm not kidding. He had bags and bags and bags. Turns out that, you know, he works in a food kitchen, right? And I said, "How are you making those?" Right? And I mean, I learned the difference between bananas, yellow plantains, and green plantains. And I've been on a plantain kick ever since. And
yeah, I love plantain.
I love plantains. And you know, the thing is, the yellow plantains are mushier. The green plantains, they're almost like potatoes, like you make mashed potatoes out of them. And you know, that's where I made the crispy plantains from the green ones. And you know, the same thing happened to me with tomatillos. I saw somebody picking them up, and I'm like, "What are those?" At the store. I'm not afraid to talk to anybody. Tomatillos. If you go to markets, sometimes they will have. They're green. They look like tomatoes.
Okay.
They're in a paper-ish husk. And they come in the husk. That's how they come. And they make salsa verde. That's how green sauce is made, with tomatillos. And I was like, "Oh my God, I love salsa verde." So now I buy them. Whatever I see them at the store, I buy them out. And I have a bush outside this summer.
Oh, okay. Well, so, these are great ways, you know.
This is how I learn people. This is how I learn.
Exactly. And these are wonderful ways for our girls to learn about other cultures, getting involved in cooking classes, going on, you know, trips and things.
And guys can do it too.
Exactly. But it's a wonderful way to learn, again, social skills, social emotional, you know, development and personal development. But and for me, you know, now that I am retired, I don't cook a lot, but I do like going out to different restaurants to try different foods. And I do have a weekend job. I'm the lead hospitality ambassador for the Downtown DC BID, which is our Business Improvement District weekend homeless services.
Oh, wonderful.
So we provide services in McPherson Park, which is one of the parks where there is an encampment. And on Saturdays and Sundays. So we have a team that hands out water, toiletries, supplies, snacks, and then we have community partners that join us that hand out snacks, clothing. Sometimes when we have our community day, dental services, haircuts, you know, food trucks, and we're going to start doing some workshops, goal setting, time management, and things like that, so that the individuals can better prepare themselves to be housed. So that's some of the other stuff that I do.
You just, you got it going on. No, you know, there's a lot in DC. DC life is a little different than the rest of the world, I think, because there's so much politics, but not necessarily the negative end. Obviously there's a negative end, but there's just, I mean, that's the industry in Washington DC is politics.
Yeah.
So you know,
I still love New York. I like DC a lot, but there's no place like New York. But DC was a great switch for me. I came down here looking for just a calmer, because I was a little crazy when I right before I came down here. But DC has been a wonderful place for me to call home now.
Are you in DC, or are you in the
I'm in DC. I live about 15 minutes from the White House.
Oh,
I'm in downtown DC. Yep.
oh, that's nice.
Yeah, I love this location. I love this location.
You
Yep.
get a lot of cherry trees.
Hmm.
Get a lot of cherry trees.
Cherry trees, yep. And because I'm near the mall, you know, I do walk down there quite a bit. And as I said, I used to be a docent at the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. So going to museums is another thing that I like to do. And now that they've opened back up, it's a great place to be, especially in this heat. So
Yes,
that's something else, you know, that's really good.
this is
About
great. Is a
Mhm.
great place, but I mean, obviously, you know, there's a number of memorials, and
Mhm.
they're pretty breathtaking.
They are. World War II, World War I now. Yeah, they are. They really are. And the other monuments,
Exactly.
you know, so this is a great place to visit and to live. It is getting expensive like every place else. So that's one of the issues that I've been working on as an elected official, especially. I'm also the tenant association president here where I live.
Keep yourself busy. So, you know, I think that, you know, I think you got into politics because it started with social working, but
Well, I got into politics. I don't like politics, but
yeah.
I got interested and I said, let me learn a little bit back in, I can't even remember, 2007, something like that, when Adrian Fenty was running for council member in the ward. I was living in Ward 4, Upper Northwest, and he was trying to unseat the incumbent, Charlene Drew Jarvis, who I loved. She did an excellent job, but she had a lot of things going on. She was the president of Southeastern University and, you know, just doing a lot of other things. And I thought it was time for a younger, you know, somebody else to come in and be groomed. So I worked on his campaign, and then I worked on his campaign when he ran for mayor. That's how I got involved in politics. I thought that that was going to be it, but I worked on a couple of other mayors' campaigns. And then eventually, I think someone in my building was the advisory neighborhood commissioner, which is the most grassroots position that you can have. It's the first elected position in DC. And we are responsible for single member districts, which is about 2,000 residents. So somebody in my building was the ANC for my single member district, and he was getting ready to leave. And because I had been vocal and, you know, just involved in the meetings, he said, why don't you run? And I said, nope, I don't want to run. Second time he asked, because somebody else had taken over, I said, okay, because I think I just retired. So I said, okay, I'll run, because you don't get paid, but there's a lot of work. But I had a lot to say, and I really enjoyed that. I did not get reelected, but then someone tapped me and said, well, why don't you run for committee woman? So there are 2 committee men and committee women in every ward for the Democratic State Committee. And our role is to make sure that the democratic process is running right, that Democrats in DC are registered if they're eligible. If they're not, get them registered, teaching them where, how, and when to vote, and that they know about the issues. And also 2 of the populations that I'm going to focus on are elders, seniors like me, and populations of color. So that's how I got into politics. But people have been asking me, are you going to run for this, run for that? I'm like, no, but I will remain active. I am, again, very vocal in the city. So
Yeah,
I will remain active.
it's not necessarily about power. It really is. And what really runs this country is not the president. It's all of the smaller districts. It's all those lower, smaller, local community level.
And that's why it's so important to acknowledge us, because a lot of times those of us who are on in the grassroots elected positions
Right.
are not, you know, acknowledged. But do a lot of really, really good work. So you're right,
I mean, what runs everybody's cities or counties isn't what the president's doing, isn't what the mayor's doing. It really is what the grassroots groups are doing.
Yeah, that's part of it.
So if you don't vote local, involved locally, you're throwing away your community.
Yep, you're throwing away your voice, and that you're absolutely spot on. Because a lot of people, we have to explain to them who we are, and where to find us on the ballot. People say, well, what do you do? And that's been one of the things that we've been trying to, ANCs and other local, like the DC Democratic State Committee, just getting people aware, making people aware, because you're right. People need to vote for everything from dog catcher on up to
exactly
everything in between. Yep.
And I'll be the first to say that when I talk about politics, I'm like, I hate politicians. They're terrible people. But the truth is, like yourself, many people don't go into politics, 1, to make money, or 2, to become famous, or 3, to become the president. They are civic and service minded, and they're just trying to clean up this, run that,
right,
make sure the community gets X. Right. And that's what they're trying to do.
Right. And that's the good politicians. I think the majority, what I am fearful of and disappointed in are those who, number 1, are too old to be in office, because I truly believe in grooming the next generation of elected officials, Republican, Independent, Democrat, because our young people have a lot to say, and they're, they have different opinions. So many of those in office who are, have been there for 20, 30, 40 years need to get out. And also the fact that what's really sad and unfortunate is that our country, the needs of many people, rich, poor, in between, are getting caught up in the ridiculous infighting and greed, selfishness of individuals, especially those in Congress. But that's a whole nother podcast conversation.
Yeah, there is a strange amount of infighting, and I'm just going to use the term divide and conquer. It's like Machiavelli all over again. It's
frightening, but it's really sad, because so many of the needs of all people are getting pushed aside because people are digging their heels in and saying, well, I'm not going to vote for that side of the house. I'm not going to vote for this side of the house, when both sides want the same thing. Not
right.
Exactly
when the road needs to get paved, period. The road needs to get paved. Let's pave the road.
They are cutting off their nose to spite their face. Right, exactly. It makes me very angry. But it also scares me, because it means that a lot of things are not getting done that need to be done.
Right.
I don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. But I am hopeful for the work that I do, because I can only do what I can do. So I'm going to do the work that I do for my girls.
Change doesn't always happen overnight.
Yeah.
And we are watching change right now, and it is, we'll use the term, it is scary, right? We don't understand what's going on. Things are.
We can be hopeful, and that's what I
exactly.
Even though I'm angry,
have to stay hopeful.
Have to stay hopeful. Yeah.
Stay hopeful, and realize that sometimes it's dark before the dawn. All those wonderful expressions that are meaningful. It's going to shake out, and I have this rather fatalist look upon things. I'm like, hey, if we don't deserve the planet, it's gonna go to somebody that does. So deserve it.
It'll
Mother Earth has a way of making it happen.
Well, she's doing it now. She's doing it now. And that's why, for me, preparing the next generation of women warriors is so important, because these, as I mentioned before, and we talked about, these young people are going to be the ones who are going to be leading, and this earth and this country, this world is going to be left to them. So again, this is my gift to preparing our next generation of elected officials, teachers, social workers, maids, flight attendants, all of that.
All of it. All of it. It's a beautiful thing. I so appreciate you coming on Email and Coffee. I am excited to see you in 2023.
Absolutely.
And how can other people find you on the internet?
So I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and you can reach me on and all of them with, my last name, Janice Ferebee, and I'll spell that out. But you can also reach me on at www.janiceferebee, JANICE, F as in Frank, ERE, B as in boy.com, or www.authorjaniceferebee.com.
Thank you so much for being on Email and Coffee.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure, Joy. It's so good to see you, and I'm so glad that you are thriving as well.
Thank you very much. Blessings to everyone. Take care now.
Bye-bye.